Okay, well, today is actually a special day. Today is the Divine Disappearance Day. It's Disappearance Day, right?
Dandas, yes, it's disappearing.
Okay,
Dandas
Ramananda Prabhu. Dandavat. We have Ramananda here. Today is the Disappearance Day of Ramananda Rai.
Yeah.
So very appropriate that you will be with us.
Lucky to be here. Today is Memorial Day weekend, so I'm off. So
Okay, very nice. Subhasini Didi is also with us. Dandavats, Didi, Dandavats.
Dandavats, Didi.
Very happy to see you as always. Chintamani Devi is here also. Dandavats. Jayadev Prabhu, Dandavats.
And I was just speaking with Premananda earlier today, and he conveyed his Dandavat pranams to you, sister.
Oh, please give my Dandavats to him. Such a sweet-hearted devotee.
Yes.
Premananda. The name is very fitting. And Rukmini is also here, tuning in from Florida. Dandavats, Rukmini. Happy to have you with us. Okay. And also our new friends in Spain are also here. Hello. Happy to have you with us again.
Hi, how are you?
Hello. Yeah, doing okay. How are you?
Good. Doing good now.
Okay, good. Okay, so I know there were some questions, at least Varun, he mentioned he had something he wanted to bring up. But today is, maybe we can postpone that for next week. Today is a special day. Today is the disappearance day of Srila Ramananda Rai. So I'll apologize in advance if some of you are very unfamiliar with some of the terms or names I mentioned. It's one of those days, where we want to express our appreciation. So we're sorry if everyone can't quite grasp everything. And next week we can resume our normal questions and answers. And in the meantime, I hope you can get something out of what I say, even if you don't follow every detail. So who is Ramananda Rai? Ramananda Rai, he was one of the principal associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for anyone who's not familiar with him, he is a non-different form of Lord Krishna, who appears in this particular yuga, age, in order to spread the movement of kirtan and divine love, Krishna prema. He is a form of Krishna coming to teach devotion to Krishna and surrender to Krishna. And in our, we are broadly known as the Krishna consciousness movement or the Hare Krishna people, but actually more specifically, our focus is on Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya, his nature is extremely magnanimous. He is, in one way, we can see him as the entrance to Krishna and Krishna Bhakti. So our main focal point is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So today we are honoring the day of disappearance of Ramananda Rai, who was one of the, as I said, one of the principal associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And especially in the, Lord Chaitanya Dev's Leela, his divine activity and play in this world, it went through different phases. There was the initial phase where he was living as a family man in West Bengal, Navadvip, and he was a very prominent scholar Sanskrit scholar, and he had many students. He traveled to different parts giving classes. He defeated one very great scholar in the day. So he was quite famous, influential, he was known as Nimai Pandit at the time. Had a beautiful young wife, loving family. This was like the first 24 years of his presence on this earth. This is like the first phase. And then at that point, at the age of 24, this necessity began to awaken within him to help the souls of this world. All of us lost, wandering souls, ignorant of our true nature and true necessity. This desire to help souls like us, it began to arise within his heart. And so he decided to take up the renounced order, the sannyas order, so he could more effectively spread the message of divine love. So he took to that order of sannyas, the renounced celibate order, and then for the next period, he was preaching throughout India. Let's see, like the next 12 years, approximately the next 12 years, he was traveling throughout India, spreading the movement of kirtan, of chanting the Lord's holy names, and this ideal of divine love. He was based in Orissa, in the state of Orissa, in Jagannath Puri, and from there he would travel to different parts of India. So that was like the next 12 years. And then the final 12 years of his presence here, he withdrew into a more, internal mood. Because Lord Chaitanya Dev, he came to this world with a dual purpose. One purpose was this public duty, which we've already mentioned, to help the souls of this world. And then he also had his own private reason for appearing as Lord Chaitanya in this world. And that was because Krishna, he wanted to experience the heart of a devotee. Because Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, and he's the recipient of all offerings and all enjoyment. But he, looking at his beloved devotees, in particular his principal and supreme devotee, Srimati Radharani, who is also the divine feminine potency. He could see that in my devotees, they are getting more pleasure than me. in their efforts to please me, they are getting more pleasure than me, more satisfaction than I am. And so therefore, he decided to take the mood and the heart of his devotee so that he could experience that sentiment for himself, to experience the fulfillment, the satisfaction that comes as a result. And in particular, the divine ecstasy that comes in the mood of vipralamba, in the mood of separation from Krishna. There is union. Union is great joy, no doubt. But separation, although there is pain there is also a more intense type of sweetness and a more intense type of union to be found within that. So in particular, the heart's revelation that comes out in separation from the Lord, and in particularly within the heart of Radharani, that was the private internal reason for Lord Chaitanya Dev's descent within this world. So these last 12, after Lord Chaitanya Dev completed his public duty, we can say, he fulfilled that public purpose, then he withdrew and spent the last years of his life primarily tasting this inner mood in the heart. And so why am I saying all of this now? This is to lead up to the fact that Ramananda Rai, he was one of the principal friends, followers, devotees of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who supported him at that time. You know, when he was experiencing that pain of separation, then Ramananda Rai, this is something very private, very internal, and in such a state, only someone who is very, very close and very intimate to you can offer support. And so that gives us some indication of what is the position of Ramananda Rai. You know, he was one of 2 or 3 persons, primarily it was Ramananda Rai and then Srila Damodar. And then also Gadadhar Pandit, but a little bit on the side, not always directly with Lord Chaitanya Dev. So primarily it was these 2 only, Ramananda Rai and then Srila Damodar. And so, when Lord Chaitanya Dev would enter these states of intense separation, then they would, Ramananda Rai and Srila Damodar, they would support him in different ways. They would know, what verse, what quotation from various Vaishnava compositions would enhance his mood or give him some relief, calm him down in some way. They knew, reciting something, singing something, they had that level of intimacy with him, and they could support him at that time of the greatest need. So Ramananda Rai, he was also he also composed literature himself, and in particular, he was known as I guess what we would call a playwright. He composed beautiful dramas, nataks, especially concerning the Leela of Shri Radha and Krishna. So he performed that very special service to Lord Chaitanya Dev. And then also after Lord Chaitanya Dev left this world, he was not here for so long, 48 years, right? It was not so long. So after Lord Chaitanya Dev left, then Ramananda Rai, he became a very important pillar within the group of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers. No, it was a very, very difficult time. And many of Lord Chaitanya Dev's associates, they quickly left the world themselves because they couldn't bear to remain much longer in his separation. Like Srila Damodar, who I mentioned, it was like the same day or the next day, like that. He couldn't bear to be separate from Mahaprabhu longer than that. So he quickly left. And others, they, within the next few years, they wound things up and they left. In terms of like the direct associates of Lord Chaitanya Dev. So, and the leading ones. But Ramananda Rai, he was someone who stayed on for some period, substantial period after Chaitanya Dev left, and he gave very important support to the community of Chaitanya Dev's followers. That was something our Gurudev mentioned about him. So he had that special role. And so there's so much to say, where to start. There are many interesting points about Ramananda Rai. One interesting point about Ramananda, interesting and significant. One point is that Ramananda Rai, he was living within a position of wealth, because, we see different examples amongst the followers of Lord Chaitanya Dev. Some of them, like Srila Damodar, Gadadhar Pandit, and then, Rup, Sanatan, they showed Raghunath Das in particular, they lived a life of extreme abnegation, not detached from worldly matters, not becoming involved with the things of this world, avoiding it as much as possible. So they showed this type of abnegation and detachment from everything of the world. But then there are a few other examples of Lord Chaitanya Dev's followers who they were, internally detached from everything, but in terms of their own, activity and occupation, they were involved with the world and involved with wealth, involved with work in the world, etc. So they showed a different type of example of devotion. Internally, it is the same spirit, but externally, it is a different expression. So Ramananda Rai, he appeared within a wealthy and influential family in Orissa. And then he was actually appointed as a governor in a region of South India that was under the control of the Orissan government. So Ramananda Rai was Orissan, born in Orissa, and then he was delegated to manage as a governor this area in South India under Orissa. And he was practically like a king, in terms of his wealth and power, influence. And then at a certain point, he left all of that behind in order to stay closely with Lord Chaitanya Dev. But then the most significant moments that we hear of in the life of Srila Ramananda Rai is in connection with a very important conversation that took place between Lord Chaitanya Dev and Ramananda Rai. And that is known as the Ramananda Samvad, which literally means Samvad, or Samvad means conversation. So it means the conversation with Ramananda Rai. And so this took place in, we can give some background first to this conversation. It took place during Lord Chaitanya Dev's travels in South India. So in that chunk of time when he was in the mode of preaching and traveling and spreading the holy name, then he met with Ramananda Rai, where he was stationed in South India. And actually, before we get to that, we can mention too, Lord Chaitanya Dev, there was this great scholar, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was of an impersonalist leaning. And he had some discussion with Lord Chaitanya Dev, and Lord Chaitanya Dev changed his heart. And so Sarvabhauma, he was previously of the Mayavad or impersonalist conception, but then he moved to the Bhakti school by his association, due to his association with Lord Chaitanya Dev, his heart changed. So it's an interesting point. So after, so they have this discussion, Mahaprabhu, Sarvabhauma has this major heart transformation. And then shortly after that, Lord Chaitanya Dev decides to begin his travels as a traveling monk, a traveling sannyasi. And so, he tells to Sarvabhauma, I'm traveling to South India. And then at that time, Sarvabhauma told him, I'm requesting you, please visit, please meet with one Ramananda Rai. And can I just add, it is Rai. It's a long A. Some people say Roy, because in Bengali, they tend to turn A's into O's. But in this case, it is specifically a long A. I'm just saying that because Roy, it sounds like a British bricklayer or something like that. So it is Rai, Ramananda Rai. So Sarvabhauma requested, you please meet with this Ramananda Rai. And so this is the interesting point. Sarvabhauma says, previously I met with him. I met this Ramananda, and I thought he was some crazy, sentimental person. I didn't think very much of him. But now, after you've changed my heart, in retrospect, I'm thinking back, and I'm realizing he's actually that person I met who I thought was, kind of crazy. He's actually, I realize now he's actually a very elevated soul. He's a very great soul. So you please meet with him. And it's interesting because we in our own lives of development and progress, we may sometimes experience that that we go through a particular experience and we have one conception of it at that time, but then later as we're evolving, then our understanding is developing, and we may look back on our previous experience and see it with a totally new vision. So that's something to be open to and to be aware of. So anyhow, so Sarvabhauma made this special request: please meet with this Ramananda. He's a very great person, great devotee. And so then along his travels, Sri Chaitanya Dev, he naturally met with Ramananda. And there's a very wonderful description of their meeting in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Wait, sorry, was there a question that came up? Oh, I see. Okay. I wasn't referring to you. I didn't see that. It's one of my pet peeves, actually. I didn't see what you wrote. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, so this is in the Madhya Lila, chapter 8, the middle section. Chaitanya Charitamrita is the main scripture that we refer to about Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his life and divine teachings. And so their meeting is described in the middle section, the Madhya Lila, chapter 8. And it's available online, database.com, if anyone wants to look it up. And there's a wonderful lead up to this famous conversation. Very kind of dramatic. It's a very dramatic meeting. Ramananda, and it's a very interesting contrast because, Lord Chaitanya Dev, he's traveling as this very simple monk, a sannyasi, and Ramananda, he's in this position of great power. And so what happens is Lord Chaitanya Dev, he's taking his bath in this river, the Godavari River, it is called. And Ramananda Rai, he comes at that time with this very grand entourage. And I don't know, like 100 people or something like that. He's like practically in a position of royalty. And then they meet each other. Just from a distance, they see each other. And there's this automatic connection between them. Actually, Krishna, Gora Lila, Chaitanya Lila, the expression of Lord Chaitanya's divine activity and pastime in this world, it is parallel to Krishna Lila, to the expression of Krishna's divine play. So all of the associates, companions of Krishna, they also have a part to play in Chaitanya Lila. so this eternal relationship is there. So Ramananda Rai, he's actually Vishakha Saki in Krishna Lila, who's one of the 8 principal gopis, cowherd maidens or girlfriends of Krishna. So they have this eternal relationship, and so they immediately recognize each other, and they immediately approach each other and they embrace, and they, showing this mood of ecstasy. And it's quite significant because, normally Lord Chaitanya Dev, in, that time in society, this is around 500 years ago, the expectations of society were very strict. There were rigid, there are very particular roles that people play and very strict expectations connected with that. And so someone who was in the role of a sannyasi, a renunciate, a monk, it was very much frowned upon for them to mix with materially minded people, or anyone who's involved with the world. So, like, for example, King Prataparudra, who was the king of Orissa, he was the king, and he was, connected with a lot of wealth and power and pleasure, etc. But in his heart, he was a devotee. He was a very great devotee, and he had great love for Lord Chaitanya. And he very much wanted to meet with Lord Chaitanya Dev. However, because of the expectations of a sannyasi, Lord Chaitanya Dev refused to meet with him again and again. Because, the idea being that if someone is trying to live a life of renunciation, then if they're mixing with someone who's involved with a lot of wealth and pleasure, it can be a distraction. That's the idea. And so Lord Chaitanya Dev, he followed all of these conventions and they're not always essential, they're not always so important, but in order to keep peace with the environment and to maintain the dignity and the prestige of his position, in order to more effectively connect with people, then he, for the most part, very strictly followed all of these expectations and conventions of society. For another example is, like sannyasis, they shouldn't even look at a woman, they shouldn't even to hear, Lord Chaitanya Dev wouldn't hear the name of a woman, so of course he had many female devotees, but the relationship was remote. So like that's how strict things were. So, for the most part, Lord Chaitanya Dev followed all of these things. So, however, this is the interesting point here. When Lord Chaitanya Dev met Ramananda Rai, that all just went out the window. They went running to each other and embraced in ecstasy. Ramananda Rai is there in this very powerful position, surrounded by all of these, servitors, etc. Dressed in this very, regal way, very opulent, wealthy way. But that all just was forgotten, because that inner pull of the heart was so strong. So Lord Chaitanya Dev forgot everything else. There's also some humor there because, they're having this moment between themselves, and meanwhile, this whole entourage of Ramananda, they're in a complete shock. Like what, like how is it, like on both sides, they can't understand, like how can this very bright and effulgent, we can see this sannyasi is very saintly in character. Why is he interested in our master, who's a materialistic person who's involved in many material affairs? They can't understand that. And they also can't understand why Ramananda, their master, is so excited and ecstatic about meeting this sannyasi. So they're very puzzled by this. And then, you know, eventually Lord Chaitanya Dev, because, you know, normally he would only show his private emotion when he was in a private circle. So eventually Lord Chaitanya Dev became aware of, you know, these onlookers, and he, you know, restrained himself. And then the two of them, they agreed to meet. I don't remember if it was that night or the next morning, but they agreed to meet as soon as possible to have some discussion. I'll also add here, they have this, at that initial meeting, they have this very wonderful exchange, very Vaishnava exchange, where they're both glorifying the other one, you know. So you know, Ramananda Rai is saying, "Oh, I'm such a materialistic person. I need your association to purify my mind." And then Lord Chaitanya Dev, he's saying, you know, I was a Mayavadi sannyasi. I was an impersonalist sannyasi, you know, but Sarvabhauma, he was very kind to me, and he sent me to you to be purified. So please give me your association. You know, I need your you know, pure association for my own benefit. So back and forth, they're you know, they're deflecting their own praise and praising one another. So this very beautiful, it's very exemplary. Because in this world, you know, our tendency is to try to take praise for ourselves, and you know, away from others. But the real Vaishnava devotional tendency is just the opposite, to deflect, you know, from ourselves and to give praise to others. This is the real devotional mood. So it is very beautifully exemplified in that meeting between Mahaprabhu and Ramananda. So anyway, then this famous conversation starts. And you know, tonight, I don't think we can go into so much detail about it. I'll give some general overview of the conversation. Actually, at the moment, I'm working on an article, because, you know, it's so important, this conversation, but I feel, I don't think that our family are as aware of it as would be helpful. So, and it, you know, it's a little intimidating also. So I'm working on an article, just kind of, you know, as like kind of like a beginner's introduction to the conversation. I'll share that. I'm trying to finish it for tonight. So, but we can say, first of all, this conversation, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, this is also important to mention, our grandfather guru, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, the founder of our mission, he had very great appreciation for this discussion. And, you know, he said something like, you know, I find that everything is within here, you know, all stages of theistic conception, they are covered within this conversation. And in particular, the Gaudiya Vaishnava ontology is perfectly represented there. And our Gurudev also mentions that in his last days, Srila Sridhar Maharaj especially liked to hear this conversation, this discussion read to him. And then another, on a more personal way, Srila Sridhar Maharaj had very special affinity for Ramananda Rai. And actually, he was given the name Ramananda. You know, initially, Srila Sridhar Maharaj's name at birth was Ramendra Chandra. And then when he came to join the Gaudiya Math, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur adjusted it to Ramendra Sundar. And then, so that was like his initiated name. And then later, Srila Saraswati Thakur, he had this project of identifying all of the places where Lord Chaitanya Dev went to on his travels throughout India. And he would mark these locations with the footprints of Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so one of these important places that Mahaprabhu visited was where this conversation took place between Mahaprabhu and Ramananda. And for that, he specifically sent Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And he requested Srila Sridhar Maharaj, you please go and identify, you discover the exact location where this conversation took place. And at that time, Srila Saraswati Thakur also changed Srila Sridhar Maharaj's name from Ramendra Sundar to Ramananda Das. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he successfully did find that location. And eventually there was a temple, a Gaudiya Math established there. And he also gave a very wonderful talk there, which was about this discussion, this Ramananda Sambad. And it was very much appreciated by his godbrothers. And another thing is that we see, in Srila Sridhar Maharaj's teachings, there are some themes which are consistently appearing. And we can see how some of them, they originate in this discussion. They originate in this Ramananda Sambad. So for example, one of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's famous expressions is dive deep into reality. And that's, there are deeper and deeper layers of reality. We should not be satisfied with a superficial acquaintance with the environment. And also progress means elimination and new acceptance. This is another key expression of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And these are both very relevant in the progress of this conversation that takes place between Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai. Because the framework of this conversation is that and this is another important point, that Mahaprabhu, he puts Ramananda in the position of the instructor. Because normally we see in other cases, Mahaprabhu himself is in the role of the instructor, and he's giving instructions, in the case of Rup and Sanatan in particular, and other cases. But then in rarer occasions, Mahaprabhu is putting somebody else in that role and is in himself inquiring. So that, that's showing what level of regard Mahaprabhu has for Ramananda, that he's, he himself is inquiring. And actually, I would like to read this, there's a very beautiful verse, which is the introductory verse to this chapter in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it gives this wonderful analogy. I'll try to, let me find the Sanskrit. I always forget that verse. It gives this wonderful analogy of Ramananda Rai as this cloud of devotion, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is compared to an ocean of devotional conclusions, and Ramananda is the cloud above, which is raining into that ocean. So, it's very significant, because a cloud gets its formation, from the water, right? That's evaporating from the ocean. And then that cloud is later giving that water back in the form of rain to the ocean. So in that way, although Ramananda is in the position of an instructor, he's been empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then by the request of Mahaprabhu, he's giving that back. And here's that verse. here. This is the Sanskrit verse opening this chapter. And our Gurudev liked this verse so much. And in fact, I heard of one occasion in SoCal when our Gurudev was just like kind of on one occasion just ecstatically, repeatedly reciting this verse. So this is the verse, Sancharja Rama Bida Bhakta Mege Swabhakti Siddhanta Chayam Ritani Gaurabdera Tera Muna Vitirnais Tajgatva Ratnala Yatam Paryati. I'll read this translation. It's difficult because a lot of Sanskrit you lose the poetry when it doesn't always work so well, the translation. But anyway, we can still hear the translation here. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is known as Gauranga, is the ocean of all conclusive knowledge and devotional service. He empowered Sri Ramananda Rai, who may be likened to a cloud of devotional service. This cloud was filled with the water of all the conclusive purports of devotional service and was empowered by the ocean to spread this water over the sea of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Thus the ocean of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became filled with the jewels of the knowledge of pure devotional service. Very, very beautiful verse. I'll also share this link here if anyone wants to. Oh, thank you, Chinmay Prabhu. He's posted it here, and I'll also post here. I'm not connected here. Keyboard. Okay, so there's a link there to that whole chapter and conversation if anyone wants to look it up. So the way that this conversation began is Mahaprabhu requests Ramananda, please tell me what is the goal of life. And he also says, and please give some evidence from scripture, and which is an important point, because how can we consider our own opinion to be fully reliable? Of course, one's own feeling and inspiration may have some validity, but there must be some verification from a higher source. Like especially in today's culture, there tends to be a kind of free for all when it comes to spirituality. What anybody says goes, or what anybody thinks or feels, it goes. But here, it's being indicated, okay, give your opinion, but give some evidence. It's not enough to just say what you think or feel. Give some back, because how do we know where your feeling is coming from? Is it coming from a real place, or is it coming from your imagination or whimsical sentiment or whatever, ego? It could be one of many things. How do we know it's not that and it's something real? So therefore you have to give some backing. You have to give some evidence for what you're stating, what you're presenting. So this is how Mahaprabhu begins. Tell me what is the goal of life with some evidence from scripture. Give some scriptural support, some backing. So that's the premise of this conversation. That's how it begins. And then, and again, I think I won't go into the details now because we don't have so much time. Yeah, I mean, I can later share the article if anyone's interested, or you can read the conversation directly. But I'll give some overview. So then basically, essentially what's taking place is Ramananda, he does not jump immediately to the final conclusion here, but he starts, so there's this whole gradation in the conversation. So it's a systematic gradation of theistic conception that is presented in this conversation. So Ramananda, he starts out with lower, more basic and elementary conceptions of the goal of life and the means to attain it. And then okay, well, thanks for your note. Thanks for your note. Thank you for joining us. Have a great evening.
I'm on mute. Thanks a million. Bye.
Bye. So Ramananda begins with more elementary conceptions. The conversation moves from general to specific, from elementary to advanced. So it's a very, very helpful text to study, because of this systematic development that takes place. And so then, so step by step, Ramananda is presenting different ideas, and then at each point in the beginning, Mahaprabhu is dismissing him, and he tells him, Ramananda will present something. So for example, the very first suggestion that Ramananda gives is Varnashram Dharma. And he cites as evidence a verse from the Vishnu Purana stating this is the only way to satisfy Lord Vishnu, by following the Varnashram Dharma, this social religious system of Vedic India. And Mahaprabhu responds with Eho Bhaya, Age Kahar, which means this is an external matter. Please tell me something deeper. Tell me something more. So what I mentioned before, this conception of elimination and new acceptance. This is the movement of progress, and also dive deep into reality. This is presented in a very clear and helpful way here in this conversation. And then Ramananda gradually moves through, the Varnashram Dharma has like a vague conception of the Lord, but there's no direct connection, no direct perception and consciousness of the Lord in one's daily activities. So it is a good approach, but it is hazy, it is vague. It has its place for a particular section of people at a particular level of realization and capacity, but it is by no means the be all and end all. It's not the final answer, final goal. So Mahaprabhu rejects that, and then Ramananda moves through different expressions of mixed devotion. So sometimes you'll hear these expressions, Karma Mishra Bhakti and Jnana Mishra Bhakti. The word Mishra means mixed. So, we are aspiring for what we refer to sometimes as Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion, or Ananya Bhakti means exclusive devotion. But before you get to that, before you get to the that pure, unmixed, unalloyed expression of devotion, there are different expressions of mixed devotion, alloyed devotion. And those appear within these categories of karma and jnana. Karma referring to our desire for attainment of worldly things. And then jnana referring to attainment of some, spiritual of a spiritual nature, but in a selfish sense. So in other words, the aspiration for liberation, purely for one's own, for one's own benefit, without any connection of the Lord's interest. So there are the lines of pure karma, and if we can say that, pure karma, and pure gyan, knowledge. But then there are those. There's also these mixed expressions. When they're devotion mixed with these things. then Ramananda, in this systematic way, he moves through these different stages of mixed devotion, and Mahaprabhu, he giving citations from scripture to back up his proposition. And each time Mahaprabhu, he's ehobaya ageka, this is external, go forward, go on, tell me something more, something deeper. This isn't enough for me. I'm hungry. I want some real food. You're giving me a snack. I don't want a snack. I want something substantial. I want a real meal here. I'm very hungry. So, for people who are just, who aren't ready for the real deal, they'll be satisfied with this. But I'm very hungry. I want something very substantial. So Mahaprabhu is dismissing these things. And then finally, Ramananda Rai reaches the stage. So we can think of these, what Ramananda is presenting as different stages of development. So then he reaches the stage of what is called Jnana Shunya Bhakti. And that means knowledge-free devotion, which has, there's a range of, there's a range of connotations to this. But in the broadest sense, it means devotion that is free from any type of calculation of one's own interest, whether in a gross or in a subtle way. Approaching the Lord for his sake, without any imposition of our own distorted ideas or desires. So free from any type of, and this is an interesting point too, what we see in these lower stages of devotion is that it's about us approaching that rather than being able to simply appreciate that as it is on its own terms. It's appreciating it through the lens of our present experience and needs and desires here and now in our conditioned position. Like in the same way, if there's a relationship we have with someone, there may be more superficial stages of the friendship that we go through, where we're in the beginning, we may be seeing this person through the lens of our own experience, our own needs, our own desires. And there may even be some level of exploitation there on the basis of that. But, if the relationship develops, if the friendship develops, then we'll come to appreciate that person on their own terms, as they are, their own version, who they are according to their own version, not according to our version. So this is also what we see in these different stages of devotion, that in the lower stages, one is appreciating divinity according to this distorted lens, artificial lens. But as we come in closer, we're appreciating the Lord as he is and how he's, really presenting himself and as he likes to be, like sometimes we'll give the example of a child, in the beginning, we see children, they'll appreciate their parents as the people who take care of them, who give them what they need. But then as they mature and grow older, they'll begin to appreciate their parents as persons in their own right, who have their own needs and their own likes and dislikes. So, we can say in one sense, it's the difference between mature and immature devotion for the Lord. So this verse, this is a very important verse. Gyane prayasham udapashya namante eva jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiyavartam sanestito shutikatam tanuvan manobir ye prajuso jitajito piasitais trilokyam. Very, very important verse. And this is the verse that when Mahaprabhu hears this, he says, this is okay. This is good. I'm happy. Now tell me more. So this is established as the platform of pure devotion. So I'll just maybe we'll conclude with just some discussion of this verse. So Jnane Prayasham Udapasya means to give up the endeavor for knowledge, Gyan. And here the word, and so, by this is meant kind of like in the way it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, the endeavor for knowledge, like the most basic meaning there is the desire to know too much, approaching in a theoretical sense, approaching just out of curiosity, and not because there's some genuine, there's no like genuine authentic need here. I mean, like one example Srila Sridhar Maharaj gives, if there's a new employee and their first day on the job, and they want to have the keys to everything, and they want to know how everything works and where everything is and where the money is, and it's like, do you actually need to know all of that now? Do you need all that information right now? The employer will be a little suspicious, like you're going to know everything on a need to know basis, gradually, let's develop our relationship. And as a matter of necessity, you'll slowly, begin to know all of the things. But you're just asking now, like, I barely know you and you need to know everything. This is just idle curiosity, or are you here to make trouble, or like, where is this coming from? They're going to be suspicious. So in the same way, if we, of course, we don't dismiss having, a clear conception of what this is all about. That's necessary. That's why we're all here tonight. But there's always the fine line. It's always the middle path, not too much this way, not too much that way. And the idea is that we know as much as we need to know in order for us to give ourselves more for the purpose of that higher plane, not so that we can put something in our pocket, and then we can tell everyone, oh, I've got this and I know this. Not out of idle curiosity, not out of the desire to have power for ourselves, but we want to know what we need to know so we can give ourselves better, and for our own inner inspiration, also for the consolidation of our own faith. Srila Sridhar Maharaj has also said that is acceptable for the purpose of our own, strengthening our own faith. That is fine. But sometimes it can turn into this, like you're collecting candy, you're collecting, oh, this is interesting and this is interesting, and it's all just a mental exercise. That is not helpful to the cultivation of devotion. So that's one way this is understood. And then also in a broader sense, as I mentioned earlier, it can also refer to the spirit of calculation, and any type of calculation, both about our own interest, like what am I getting out of this, whether in a material or spiritual way, what's in it for me, and then also in a more refined sense, this calculation can also, and this isn't applicable to us at our stage, but at a higher stage, it means having having too much awareness of the Lord's divinity, or being attracted to this mood of worshiping the Lord in this expression of opulence and majesty. So in other words, worship of Vishnu or Narayan, because the residents of Vaikuntha, the the devotees of Lord Vishnu and Narayan, they are worshiping in this, there's some distance there, and mostly the relationship is on a master-servant basis. There's this consciousness, oh, this is the Supreme Lord, and we are worshiping him, we are serving him because he's the Supreme Lord. And of course, this is a very wonderful thing, but this is not, this is something very distinct from the natural, automatic type of loving service that comes from the beloved companions and devotees of Krishna. In Vrindavan, they don't know that Krishna's God. That would spoil their relationship. They worship him and serve him because they love him and because he's beautiful and he's so charming and attractive. And so because of that, they're able to have these very intimate exchanges with Krishna. But if they had too much awareness that he is God, then all of that intimacy and very fine expression of love, it would be inhibited. It wouldn't be possible. So as I said, this isn't something applicable for us at our stage. It would be dangerous for us to try to cultivate that mentality right now when we're very much in this bodily consciousness. But we can remember this just in terms of understanding what is the ideal of our line. In appreciating that, then we can consider that point. So gyane prayasam udapasya, to give up anything connected with knowledge, calculation, all of these things. And then, so you've eliminated the negative side, and then what's on the positive side? To hear from the sadhus. Actually, this verse, actually, this is spoken by Lord Brahma. This is in these beautiful prayers spoken by Lord Brahma to Krishna after he made the mistake of underestimating Krishna's position and hiding all of the cowherd boys and calves. But anyway, so Lord Brahma is saying, one who, this rejection, expressing this rejection of this aspiration for calculation or knowledge. And then what does one do on the positive side? One takes shelter of the sadhus, one takes shelter of the devotees. There are several important points in this verse. So the importance of the Vaishnava, the importance of sadhu Sangha is also emphasized in this verse. To hear the messages of the Lord, to hear about the Lord from his devotees. That's something deeper and sweeter and more meaningful, rather than hearing directly. Of course, we are hearing directly from the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is directly giving his instructions. That has its value. But connecting through the sadhu, through the devotee, that is something of deeper significance. And that's what really gives us a substantial connection with the Lord. So to hear the message, Brahma speaking to Krishna, to hear the messages about you from your devotees, this is what is recommended. And then to not only hear in a passive way, but tanuvan manobir, means bodily, mentally, verbally, with every aspect of our being, we will cultivate those messages, those teachings, those talks about the Lord, those divine messages. They will become a part of our living expression. They will become a part of our being in a very vital and dynamic way. Not that we're just hearing in a passive way and continuing with whatever we want, but we're imbibing those teachings, taking them into our heart, and then making them a part of our lives, a part of our consciousness, a part of our activity. So that's a very key point in this verse. And another interesting point in this verse is it's mentioned, this phrase stane stita is mentioned, which means wherever you are situated. So in other words, you don't have to physically change your occupation or your environment. You don't have to, it's not that everybody has to give up your family, give up your job and join your nearest Hare Krishna temple, but it's primarily an internal cultivation. So, however you are situated, you can begin that cultivation and make it a part of your life. You don't have to do a wholesale change of your physical circumstances. So that's another point there. And then the last line, it says that, and this is another key point here, and this is the deep significance of devotion, that that supreme unconquerable being, here Krishna is referred to as Ajita, which means unconquerable. That who is normally unconquerable, who is normally Ajita, he will become Jita. He will become conquered. If someone can truly approach with this mood of wholesale surrender, then the Lord himself will be conquered by that person. And it's interesting because this prospect of surrender, it's something that frightens us. We have to give up everything, and become a slave of the Lord. And that's one side of it. But what's the other side? That the Lord himself will become your slave. If someone really approaches with this mood of wholesale self-surrender, that's a very powerful movement, a very powerful expression. And the Lord himself will be moved to give himself to his devotee. So, who is the Geyapaji, this last line, who is, you are the Lord of the three worlds, unconquerable, but who can approach in this type of spirit? You will be conquered by them. That is the power of such a pure heart's approach to the Lord. So this is the starting point now. This is the platform of pure devotion. And so, as I said, then at this point, previously Mahaprabhu was saying, this is external, tell me something else, tell me something more. But here at this stage, Mahaprabhu says, eho hoi, means this is okay, this is good, this is all right, yeah. But then he also says, age kahar, but tell me something more. So then, upon that platform, then Ramananda moves through different stages of devotion, of different expressions of pure devotion. And beginning, going through the different relationships with the Lord, going through different levels of intimacy in connection with the Lord. So these 5 relationships of Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, Madhur. Did I mention all 5? They are described there. They are outlined there, discussed there. The passive relationship of the mood of a servitor, the mood of a friend, the mood of a guardian, and then finally Madhur Ras, the mood of a lover. So these 5 relationships are discussed, and then at the conclusion, or not the conclusion, but then once those are discussed in a general way, then more specifically there's discussion of Radha and Krishna, their relationship, and like that. And then also we can mention there's this very sweet moment when because so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the deepest understanding of his nature is this combined form of Krishna and taking the enriched, Suvalitam, enriched with the heart and halo of Radharani. So Lord, to the deepest understanding of Bhagavan Sri Chaitanya Dev this is the most esoteric understanding of his nature, is as the combined form of Shri Radha and Krishna, the supreme male principle, supreme divine feminine principle, combining in one form. And so then at a certain point in this discussion, Ramananda, he starts to receive some revelation of this. And he mentions to Mahaprabhu, before I was seeing you as a sannyasi, and now I'm having this vision of, this beautiful dark cowherd boy, Krishna, and this beautiful young maiden, Radharani. And so then he's inquiring from Mahaprabhu, who are you really, and what is your real nature? I'm getting some revelation of that, along these lines. And Mahaprabhu at first he tries to evade that, and he tells him, oh, I understand, where you're coming from. You're one of these great Mahabhagavat devotees, and in the scriptures it says about them that they see Krishna everywhere. The highest type of devotee, they're seeing Krishna's presence everywhere. So yes, you're seeing Krishna in me. I understand, because you're a great devotee, you're seeing Krishna everywhere. The Mahaprabhu tries to evade this in that way, but Ramananda, he can't tolerate this, and he tells Mahaprabhu, don't mess around with me, don't play with me, don't joke with me, we have some relationship here, don't treat me like this, and so Mahaprabhu, he's not able to hide from the devotional vision of Ramananda Rai. And then I'll mention lastly that there's another point of significance here, which is that this vision, this is a vision that only Ramananda Rai had. I mean, there were very few select devotees who knew of this internal nature of Mahaprabhu, but it's only described, only Ramananda is described as having had a direct vision of this. And then this vision of Ramananda Rai, of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Radha Krishna, this is specifically the worship that was established in our missions, in our Gaudiya lineage by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So that's what Saraswati Thakur established in his temples, this combined form of worship of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also Sri Radha Krishna. So that, and then in Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math, in our Gurudev's mission, that that tradition was continued. That's like our kind of like our main worship, and then in some temples it's only Mahaprabhu, or in some cases Gaur Nitai, but this is like our principal worship, this combined worship, and it is significant because it is showing the ontological nature of Sri Chaitanya Dev as the combined form of Radha and Krishna, and also his superior position, because the way that he is in the order on the altar, traditionally in the Vedic culture, the most respected person will be seated on the right side. And so in the arrangement of the worship that we have on our altars, the way that Lord Chaitanya Dev is manifesting himself is in that position, in the most dignified, elevated position. Because why? Because he's the combined expression of Radha Krishna. He's the most complete expression of rasa, divine feeling and ecstasy. So anyway, this is another point about Ramananda Rai, that what was his own, heart revelation and vision, that, that is the worship that we are carrying on in our temples. We're running out of time. There are some other nice histories with Ramananda, but yeah, I think that's enough for today. Does anyone want to, before we end, does anyone want to add anything? Chinmoypuru, anything you want to add?
I would say, because I recently read the Ramananda Samvad, and I would just like to mention the caution too, because after the main part, it goes pretty deep into the Mudura Rasa. So you can even skip that part.
Yeah, that's that's a good point. For us, going up, like the part that we described now, that's like the section that's helpful for us. And then after that, there are some more elevated topics which are discussed and aren't so helpful. If we're going through, it's good you pointed that out, because generally our Guru's instruction is, if we are going through like a daily reading of Chaitanya Charitamrita, then we don't need to skip over anything. We can just cover like as part of the continuation. But if we're going specifically to read specific sections, then there are some parts which we won't go to look too close, and that is one of those sections in Chaitanya Charitamrita, because it's describing some of the more intimate details of the relationship between Radha and Krishna, which is very much subject to our misinterpretation and distortion because of our material experience and reference points. So that's important point to remember. Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe Suvasini Didi or Govindanandini? Is that Jivana? Didi in San Jose joining us? Jivana, Didi, is that you? Okay. Well, I'm certainly very honored. We are very blessed to have you with us. And there are some other persons who've joined us. Nilambari, Devi Dasi, welcome. A friend of Chintamani, Vladini Shakti, welcome. Happy to have you with us. We have a Julian here. Thank you all for joining us.
Julian is Jayananda.
Julian is Jayananda. Okay, cool. Happy to have you with us, Jayananda. How's everything going?
It's only getting better and better every second, I guess, hearing beautiful talks and wonderful spiritual inspiration.
Okay.
What can be
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate because we have some spiritual direction in our lives. Otherwise, if we look at the world around us, what point do we see in really living? Such madness around us. So we're very blessed. We've by the grace of our gurus, we have some understanding of the real purpose of our lives, our true natures, and we've also been given some means and guidelines by which that can be realized in a living way. So, regardless of what's going on in the world around us, we can always try and tune in, whether in the form of a group like this or internally in our own meditation and internal focus. We can try to connect with that spiritual current. We had a nice discussion here yesterday. Our Gurudev would speak about and also our Param Gurudev would speak about these two waves, these two currents that are running parallel in this world. The in-caring current, which is taking us to the center, to Krishna consciousness, to God consciousness. And there is the out-carrying current, which is taking us away to material consciousness, to selfish consciousness, and all these things. These two waves are running parallel, or one way our Gurudev referred to it as the waves of kama and prema. Kam referring to lust, and prema referring to divine love. So, our Gurudev, he also expressed, we're always moving between hopelessness, between hope and hopelessness. We're always moving. When we're connecting with that spiritual wave, that transcendental wave, we're naturally full of hope and optimism. But if we're connecting with that material wave, then we are feeling the opposite. We're feeling dark, we're feeling depressed, and all of these things. So, it's a constant challenge that we face as practitioners, to refocus ourselves, to realign ourselves with that spiritual current, that spiritual wave. It's always flowing. It's just a matter of whether we're connecting with it or not. It's not that the current's not there sometimes. Of course, it's also true that it can be more obscured at times, especially if we're, when we meet someone who is, living that wave, that spiritual wave, then it's like this doorway that opens to us, because we're seeing it in this very tangible way in the form of this person. Our Gurudev, he was like that, his presence was so bright. He was so firmly situated and personifying that spiritual current. So just being in his presence made that current directly accessible. That door was opened to us. And if we're privileged enough to be in the connection of such a soul, then it is like a kind of easy access point to tune into that spiritual wave. But in any case, that wave is always there. We may have to make more effort to try to connect to it sometimes, but it is always there. It is not that it is not there. There's a beautiful quote of Srila Sridhar Maharaj and Sri Guru in His Grace where he says, we are beggars. We are beggars of the truth. We are beggars of the pure current, the fresh current of truth that is always flowing. Oh, Dandavat Jadu Gopal Prabhu. I think I missed him. He's saying goodbye. Oh, I missed him. So that fresh current of truth that is always flowing. It's always flowing. We are beggars of that. We are seeking. We want to always situate ourselves as beggars and seekers of that genuine, authentic current that is always flowing. So, yes, as I said, it's a constant challenge to try and tune in and connect with that wave. Okay, well, I'll stop with my waffling here. And anyone else want to add anything, or should we close? Okay, well,
thank you very much, Vishakha Didi. Very inspiring, very nice.
Thank you, Ramananda Prabhu. Happy you could join us.
Thank you so much.
Jai Srila Ramananda Rai ki Jai. Tadiya Tirabhav Mahamahotsavati ki Jai. All the venerable assembled Vaishnavas and sincere seekers ki Jai. Wishing you all the best, and look forward to next week.
Jai Vishakha Devi Dasi.
Vishakha Devi.
Bye.
Bye.